Hey, this is Solid Snake, and you're listening to Droids Canada. So, pay some damn attention.
This is David Faustino.
Hello, this is Andrew Chalmers, the writer and doctor in Doctor Who Dark Journey.
This is Dr. Stevo.
Everybody, this is the Cavernator.
This is Inspector Gadget.
Hey, what's cracking, y'all? It's your boy J-Rock.
Good evening, folks. This is James Duval.
This is Jeremy Taggart.
This is Kim Possible.
I'm Chris Holden-Reed.
Hey, this is Pat Mastroianni from Degrassi.
This is the evil Dr. Bad Vibes.
Again, this is Nessie Bear. And this is more from X-Men.
Hey, this is Andrew Cassess.
This is Sean Gunn.
Hi, this is Robert Carradine.
It's Tammy Stronach from The Neverending Story.
Hey, it's Zach Callison.
Hey, I'm DJ Jenny Rod.
And I'm Neil Young.
I'm Commander Shepard. Ralph Garman here. You're listening to Droids Canada. You've made an excellent choice. You have chosen wisely.
Warning. Listener discretion is advised.
That means there's a lot of fucking swearing.
Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Demolition panel!
Yay! Now then, ladies and gentlemen, in the audience today, I am Dan with Droids Canada. I am joined here by Dr. Stevel from Chatting with Dr. Stevel, and we have the pleasure of being able to chat with Axe and Smash Demolition. Now then, you know what?
Too close together, maybe.
Now then, little microphone problems. Now, to start the panel, I am going to have a couple questions for you to talk about your days in the WWE. Now, being in what I consider the most iconic tag team division of all time, you had the Killer Bees, you had the Can-Am Connection, you had the Islanders, you had the Rougeau brothers, and then at the top of that division, you have Demolition. Now, with that, how was it fighting against all of those different tag teams, and what was your favorite tag teams to work with?
Well, it was actually a pleasure because, at that time, I think the fans recognize, and a lot of the people we talked to, tag teams at that period in the company ran the company. You had a couple individuals like Hogan or Warrior or Savage, but most of the matches, and it's much easier to have action and movement in tag teams than in singles. All of those guys you mentioned, plus Powers of Pain and Legion of Doom and the Hearts, Strike Force, Bulldogs. I mean, how can you go wrong having matches with those guys? It was easy. It was fun and easy.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky, and I think they were lucky too, because at that time it was the greatest tag teams around, and everybody was good. So when you went in the ring, you knew you weren't going to get hurt. You knew you were going to have a good match, and it was just it was a lot of fun out there.
Excellent. Now, with that, you know what? This eye patch is driving me crazy, and I can't even think with that.
No, I can look at his lazy eye. It's kind of weird.
So then, you did have a very historic tag team run. Oh, thank you. You had a very historic tag team run. You had the record for the longest amount of time with the classic tag team titles. Now, tag wrestling, you had your which is a very, very popular saying in the WWE is the WrestleMania moments. Now, you've had many matches in WrestleManias. Now, what would you consider would be your WrestleMania moment? Would that be WrestleMania 4 when you got the titles with that massive beatdown on Strikeforce? Would it be 5? Would it be 6 when you defeated the Colossal Connection? What would be your favorite WrestleMania moments?
I don't know how many we were in. We were in 6 or 7 of them. I don't know. Does anybody know?
For breakfast.
Yeah.
Well, I know you had the 3. You won titles 3 times in 5, 6, and 7.
I think.
4, 5, and 6.
All of them are very memorable. But I think for me, it was probably against Haku and Andre in the Toronto. Yeah, and because they were a couple of our friends, and Andre was this big, and Haku was a friend of ours this big. So Yeah, so I think it was that one, Andre and Haku for me.
I enjoyed, like I said, I enjoyed all of them. And someone else asked us this afternoon, earlier this afternoon, a similar question. And it's hard when you're involved in it to say, well, this is this and that. But when you step back, you can enjoy what you did. I can remember parts of each one of the matches. I enjoyed working with Martel and Tito, Andre and Haku. And just so many good positive moments that we had. We were lucky that we were in a position we were in. And like Barry says, I think the guys that worked with us appreciated it because we weren't selfish. We wanted the match to be the best match of the evening, whether it sacrificed something of us or them sacrifice. You know, nowadays you get into situations where there's individuals out for themselves, and it shows in the events, it shows in the ring. So at that time, it didn't matter who we worked with. You know, Bulldogs and Hearts, they wanted the best match too.
And one thing about what we did is we trained every day, and we really took pride in when we got in the ring to have the best match. So all the teams that went against us, the one thing that they did know is when they got in the ring, they were going to have to work and work hard, because that's how we did it every day. And if they didn't, we'd bury them, we'd eat them alive. So that's kind of how it was. That was the real part of it.
Well, that being said, you guys had great matches with everyone else, but there's that one moment in 1987, I believe? 89, sorry. The Royal Rumble, where you guys were number 1 and 2. You had to work against each other, beat each other up.
My jaw still hurts because I never got hit that hard before. No, what?
Well, I got hit harder than that one time, but it was by my wife. But yeah, that was. You know what? We've been reminded about that because it must stick out for thousands of fans. There again, at the time, we didn't realize how significant it was, and both of us were never ever happier to see Andre get her right.
You know, what was crazy though is we didn't know we were going to be 1 and 2. So when you went out first, didn't you?
Yeah.
I can't remember half the stuff that went on, but when he went out, I'm thinking to myself, you know, he's got a long night. Maybe I'll be, second to the last out or something, and I'll have kind of an easy night. Then all of a sudden the music played again, and it was like, now what do I do? I got to get beat up by my partner here. So, yeah, like you said, it was kind of neat when Andre hit the ring, and then we get to get back together and tag up again.
Well, we just couldn't. I think it was 1 minute in between, or 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So you couldn't stand there and smile at each other or tell jokes for 2 minutes. And I think it surprised the fans and entertained the fans. But boy, that was a long 2 minutes because we had never done that before.
As a fan watching on television, seeing you two come out as 1 and 2, I mean, I was like shocked. What's going to happen? I mean, we've never seen something like this before. A tag team going against each other.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably thought, because we get it a lot of times at conventions and gatherings, well, we thought you guys were going to break up at that point and, fight each other for a deal. So we did.
Well, you do have to say with that, after that was to me the very first Royal Rumble iconic moment. Every time you had an advertisement for future Royal Rumbles, it would always show that clip of the two of you just feeding each other.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, that happened for... I haven't really watched the Royal Rumble lately since the WWE Network has come out, but from growing up, every Royal Rumble would always show Royal Rumble and would show you guys just feeding each other.
Yeah, that's neat.
Well, this is interesting how you said you didn't know you were going to be number 2 or number 1. I work sometimes in the indie wrestling, and a lot of the what's going to happen is predetermined, so for the fans. But you guys were thrown into that. That's amazing.
Well, they had the music, so you could, I think everybody at that time had their own particular music, so you listened to it, and And the backstage people told me, you're out first. You're out to the ring, number one, when the music played. But I had no idea who. I thought they started the music over again for a mistake, actually.
And none of the wrestlers really knew what point they were going out? It was just hey, by the way, you're up now?
As far as I know. Of course, maybe they were troublemakers and they wouldn't tell us. I don't know.
Wow. Now then, Bill, I have a question for you, being one of the original Demolition when it was with Johnny Valiant. Now, the creation of the Demolition characters, with the studs, with the leather, with the mask, with the face paint, did you have any input on the creation of that?
Oh yeah,
those
we
characters?
had total input. Randy Colley came up with the concept. Remember the movie
Mad Max?
Mad Max.
Mm-hmm.
And the main villain there had the hockey mask and the straps and all that stuff. And Randy had come up with a lot of the concept, and then we tweaked it a little bit. He had fur boots at the time, was up to the knees, and I figured, it didn't go with the character. But as far as the names and stuff like that, we had total control over.
Mm-hmm. And Barry, when you became part of Demolition, the Mr. Fuji managed Demolition, what kind of input did you have? Did you further the concept of what you were doing with Demolition?
Well, actually, we were together with Johnny Valiant, and then it switched to Fuji.
Mm-hmm.
But when I became Smash up there, I was just leaving Mid-South, or Crockett territory.
Mm-hmm.
When I just left there, I was partners with Ivan Koloff. I got a call from Vince, and I went up there, and he made me sign a contract that I couldn't say anything about what we were going to talk about. And he came out with pictures of the Demolition, and he was asking me about it, and he says, how would you like to tag up with Bill Eadie? And I said, definitely. And that's kind of how it all started. But I was pretty young back then. I was probably 24, 25 years old, and I just knew better not to say anything. I was happy to be there, happy to have Johnny Valiant as our manager at that time, and then really happy when Fuji became our manager. But as probably the youngest guy in the territory, I didn't want to put any input in it. I just listened to everybody.
Yeah, I was basically, not that we fired Valiant, he just didn't match our character. He was a little bit comical, literally coming out of left field periodically, and we'd be doing something very serious or sinister, and then he'd be cracking a joke. And it wasn't that we disliked him, but we saw Fuji, and Fuji just matched our character. Sinister, devious, conniving, and I basically asked Vince, I said, can we have Fuji as our manager? And he said, of course.
And we knew that Fuji would never cheat or anything because we were straight as an arrow all the time. So that's what we wanted to do.
Of course.
We followed all the rules.
Wasn't it a smack with the cane to win your first title?
Extra props. You gotta take
Somebody threw that in your hand, didn't they? And
I was trying to remove it from the ring.
And he got in the way, right?
He got in the way. He tripped over.
But about that,
That was
the cane that was used in there, usually they use kind of a brittle cane maybe, or something. Well, Fuji went out and bought a brand new one that was green, so it wouldn't break. So when Axe hit Martel over the back, I mean, he really nailed them.
Yeah.
And it just was like...
You could hear it. You could hear him.
Him going...
Oops. Yeah. Okay, you came out as bad guys, and the crowd started cheering you. You eventually won them over, and then you turned them good fan favorites. What's your favorite playing, the heel or the face?
Well,
because your tactic didn't really change much.
No, we didn't change. We changed entrance doors. We didn't change our style, simply because years ago when I was wrestling as my superstar, the same thing happened. The fans hated me, or with him, that's Khrushchev. But I think that they sort of respect your ability. And George Scott told me, he said, he was a matchmaker at the time, he said, don't change a thing. The fans like you because you're tough, you're you can dish it out and you can take it. So don't all of a sudden don't start doing head scissors and arm drags and stuff, because they'll say, we hated this guy, but now he's on our side. And it would have been silly for us to start doing hip tosses and drop kicks. And, they liked us or respect us for what we did. We consider ourselves specialists. Eyes, ears, nose, and throat. And occasionally we'd stomp somebody.
Those are every target that you would go for?
Yes.
Yeah, we specialize on those. And I think the people, I enjoyed both. We had a little more control being the bad guy, but the people that we worked with, I think, respected us enough to let us control the match even as good guys.
Now then, Barry, with touching upon being one of the heels or one of the bad guys, you had a few different characters after Demolition. The Repo Man, that one really stands out, going from a brute force style wrestler to the kind of sneakiness of the Repo Man. Now, I understand you had some past experience which helped create the Repo Man character.
Yes, before I broke into wrestling, I used to bounce at a bar with the Road Warriors and Rick Rude, and then I had an extracurricular job picking up people's cars, repoing them. So that's kind of how the idea started. And I went a little bit further with the Repo Man character, but some of the stuff that was there is really what you did in real life. So it was, when I became the Repo Man, I completely changed who I was and what I was, and really portrayed that part,
So then with Repo Man and with Blacktop Bully, and I understand you're an avid golfer.
Yes.
Mr. Hole in One.
I love that gimmick.
Which one of those gimmicks was your favorite to play?
I think, Smash, but I think the Blacktop Bully was my favorite.
Now, was that a crazed fan that turned into something, or?
What that was Ric Flair was the booker at that time in the NWA, and he called me up. He says, "Barry, I want you to come up here." And I was in Minnesota, and I said, "Well, what am I going to do?" He says, "Why don't you get with Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton for about a week, and just come up with something." So we were sitting in Bobby Eaton's garage, drinking beer, and it was about the fourth day, and Arn Anderson looks at me and he says, he goes, "You look like the Blacktop Bully." And I said, "The Blacktop Bully?" He says, "Yeah, you're going to be a truck driver that hates everybody. You're the Blacktop Bully." And I said, "That's what it is." Called up Ric Flair, and I was the Blacktop Bully.
Now, before you guys teamed together, you guys did tag with some legendary wrestlers that we consider legendary now, like King Kong Bundy, the Koloffs, Nikolai Volkov, Jimmy Hart. Who are your favorite ones that you guys have teamed up before teaming with each other?
Oh, geez. That's hard because I had a few matches with Bundy. I would say Scott Irwin. He was Super D when I was in Georgia. Paul Jones, I was tagged with Paul for a while in Mid-Atlantic. Most of my events, other than those two guys, were singles. I did a lot of singles.
So what was that question again?
Well, we all know that your favorite tag team partners are each other to work with.
So
now, before, if you had to pick a secondary one, a number two, I should be saying that with my eye patch on, but I can't even think straight with that on. Now, your number two, who would it be from the people whom you have worked with in the past?
Gosh darn, Ivan Koloff, Nikita. I had so many good ones. I suppose it would be Ivan, other than Bill, I had some really, really good times with Ivan, good matches, and I learned a lot from Ivan.
So how did you get kind of duped into being one of the Russians?
I was down in Mid-South Wrestling with Bill Watts, and I came in my name was Man Mountain Darsow at the time, and I carried an axe, and I was a baby face. And I got down there, and I was terrible. I didn't know what to do, how to do it. I couldn't do a promo. You know, I knew how to wrestle, but I didn't know how to, you know, really do it. And then Nikolai Volkov was down there, and he wasn't really getting over. You know, he was over, but he wasn't. And he needed some help, you know, a partner. So the best way was for him to get a young tag guy, was me. So that's when Bill Watts says, I'm going to make you a Russian. You're going to be hated worse than anybody. He says, your name's going to be Crusher Khrushchev, and you're going to get a shovel. You're going to go on an interview, and you're going to tell everybody you're going to bury every American. So that's what I did. And the day I did that, I became a heel. And everybody down there wanted to kill me. I mean, it was bad. And that's when I really learned how to do things. And it just, then I could kind of cut a promo because I was an American that loved Russians. And then my whole life changed when that happened. I learned how to work.
Now, did you ever get any heat in real life by doing that?
Oh, yeah, I did. In fact, when I met my wife down in Charlotte, North Carolina, her dad was a Vietnam vet. And she brought me home to introduce me to her father, and her father had a gun pointed at me just like this, and he says, boy, what's your name? And I said, Barry Darsow from Robbinsdale, Minnesota.
So, there's always legendary tales of being on the road in the WWF. You know, from the prank wars. Straight to you, if I feel like you got something here. So, you know, the stories of, you know, the amount of alcohol Andre could consume, what Kurt Hennig would be doing with anyone. What is your most memorable on-the-road story being with WWF?
Oh, there again, you know, it's hard to choose. We've talked about this a number of times. And if you tell what really happened, people say, that's bullshit, he's making that up. Well, it's not bullshit. Talking about Andre, before we were tags, I was in Montreal with Andre, and he owned part of the territory. Well, he didn't like to be around the press a lot, but we were getting ready to go to Japan. He and I made about 9 trips to Japan together. Anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. Some of them I was his opponent, some of them we were just on the card, and some of them, 4 or 5 of them, they had a tournament. New York, Madison Square Garden tournament. And I was his partner. So they sent an advance group of press people over, and we were sitting in a restaurant, famous restaurant in Dunn's Restaurant up there in St. Catharines. And Andre didn't eat that much. He ate enough to sustain, but he did drink a lot. And this is not a normal sized beer, but if you can imagine a 16 or 18 ounce beer, in Andre's hand, that's what it would look like. He drank 101 beers. Now, to us, that's maybe a 2 swallow, right? To Andre, that's a 2 swallow. 101 of them at lunch. Well, that hit the press over there. And he did that a number of times. And then he would experiment, and I think I told Barry about this. I was up there still as a superstar, and we're flying into Pittsburgh. Well, he got this kick that he was drinking a drink called mudslides. I don't know what's in it. It's a mixture of all kind of stuff, plus milk, and I think that
Kahlua and milk.
I think that he thought the milk would ease the hit. And he used to get off the plane and get the cart, and they'd take him to the front, pick up his bag, and he'd go out and he'd wait for us out in the parking lot to pick up for the shuttle. And there was a Volkswagen and another little car, and there was an opening in a parking space. We come out, we can't find Andre. He had passed out in the parking space.
Pretty much the size of the Volkswagen?
Well, yeah, about the same size as the Volkswagen. Pedro Morales was with us, so we picked him up, and I mean, there must have been 3 cops and 4 baggage handlers and stuff, put him on one of those carts, put him in the van, the shuttle van, took him over to the hotel, which was fortunately just across, it's like here at the Hyatt, just across the street. And then we're trying to get him in, and we're we're struggling to get him into the registration area, and he falls back on top of Pedro Morales. And all you see is 2 hands and 2 feet. Help, help! That's my Andre story. It's true.
I got a quick Andre story. Good, easy one. We worked with him I don't know how many days in the ring and everything, and one day, it was before the WrestleMania, in fact, and he came up to me and he says, boss, he says, I want you to lay those punches in a little bit more. And I said, lay them in. I says, I'm hitting you pretty good. He said, no. Need to lay them in. So we get in the ring at WrestleMania, and I'm doing something to him, and I started nailing him, and I hit him. I hit him good. Caught him right in the lip, and I seen his lip right away get big. And he goes, not that hard!
Is there anyone in the audience here that has any questions?
X, when they told you that Crush was going to be taking over, that you're just going to be on the side like a manager, was that because you were having health problems, or was it because they just wanted to make you guys a threesome?
No, I had a standing contract where I went back and forth to Japan. I was in Japan 42 different times, anywhere from a week to 8 weeks. Over those years, I consumed a considerable amount of shellfish, and I developed an allergy to it. And I had experienced an anaphylactic reaction. What was set up, I was going to make a move from the team to the office. So we had already discussed that. And then just before WrestleMania, I didn't know I had the allergy. I had a shrimp dinner, had the reaction, and it precipitated us moving forward. So, I mean, it wasn't anything that we didn't know. It just accelerated.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure. Mark? Fuji was known as like the master ribber. Did he, any good Fuji rib stories, pulling pranks on guys? Or?
God, there were so many of them.
What about Adnan when he fed him?
Oh, yeah.
You guys know Adnan Casey, right? The manager. Well, Adnan and Fuji didn't get along. For some reason, I don't know. I mean, we didn't pry. And Fuji invited Adnan to his home and served him dinner, but it was all different types of dog food. It was a spread. And one time he blew off the hood of S.T. Jones's car, set a bunch of M80s on the engine, taped them down, and when they got hot, they were going down the highway and blew the lid off of it. But he never pulled any ribs on us. I think that he realized he was traveling with us all the time, and not that we would have enjoyed being a recipient, but he never did.
And I heard one story one time when he was mad at somebody who drove somebody's car in their pool, in their backyard. He hot-wired their car in the middle of the night, drove their car in the pool. I don't know whose car it was, but it was one of the guys. Yeah, he had some doozies.
Anyone else with questions?
Yes, your music. Who came up with your theme music for the entrance?
That was Jimmy Hart came up with that. He did an incredible job. Got together with Rick Derringer and whoever else, but Jimmy created all that, and then plus he did a lot of other music for a lot of the other guys.
He did most of the theme music at that time for all the guys. And I remember we were in Madison Square Garden, and he said, "I want you guys to listen to something." And boy, we loved it the first time we heard it. They tweaked it a little bit. They changed some of the verbiage and all that, but it fit. I thought it fit our character good.
Your music was really good. Not only in the wrestling ring, but it was played all around the on the radio station.
Oh yeah, my daughter was in high school at the time, and every morning I guess the bus driver knew who she was, so every morning he'd flip the channel on. She'd hear it at least twice before she got to school. She got sick of hearing it, but she says, he plays it every day, Dad.
So no one picked on your daughter because her dad was a...
Nobody picked on my daughter. No. Even my son-in-law. My son-in-law, pretty big guy, football player from Memphis. And I never had a problem with him. Of course, he wouldn't hurt her anyway, but, you know, I told him what I expected, and so it was nice.
Did Jimmy Hart and Rick Derringer sing it?
Rick Derringer sang it.
Okay.
Yeah. Jimmy Hart wrote the lyrics and the music.
Now, being a fellow father with a daughter, how is it when the daughter started bringing little young gentlemen over to the house and they have to meet acts?
Oh, hey, it's my wife's going through the same thing. We've got an older grandson who's, I'm assuming it's his fiance. He hasn't made an announcement yet, but my wife, it's killing my wife, you know. And you know, they're babies. They're your babies all the time. So.
Yeah, could you imagine you're a guy bringing his daughter to his house to meet the father, and you see him with that low voice, you know, hey, you better take care of him. You know what I mean? You'd run. I mean...
I do have to say the voice with the promos as well, the one that sticks out when it was the Hulkamaniacs with Jake Roberts and the two of you with Hulk Hogan for one of the matches, like getting into that gravelly voice is something special.
Well, you know, I don't think it was always gravelly, but I get comments. Was it? But you know, we used to do interviews, and I don't know how they do it now, but we used to do 2 days of taping. And we'd be there from 9 o'clock in the morning till midnight. Now you're wrestling in between, but you start your promos at 9 a.m., you know, and we were the main events or the semi-main events on most of all these cards, and you're doing interviews for 3 weeks out, and you're probably doing 50 to 60 interviews a day. And we had to be in character. So I don't, you know what, it's funny because I go periodically now to the doctor every 6 months for a checkup. And I don't know what's wrong with the doctor. He says, you sound hoarse. I said, Doc, I've known you for 7 years. It's the same voice I've always had. He says, well, it sounds worse.
Well, you know, and then to hand it to Vince McMahon a little bit, he'd be in that interview room with all the guys, and he could pretty much do everybody. So if he said, you know, I want you to do, you know, say something about Buffalo or New York, you know, and he'd actually use your voice and say something kind of, you know, something like this, you know. So he was really good at it. You know, you hate to put Vince over it, but
we prided ourselves in, you know, one thing that we prided ourselves in, and poor Crush suffered for it. We used to do one take. All they had to do is tell us where we're at, what times the matches, who we're wrestling, and we'll take it from there. And boom, we'd do it, you know, 30 second, 45 second, a minute and a half, whatever, one take. And that's how it worked. We never did double takes. Well, when Crush came in, there was a lot of pressure on him because he was a green guy. He's thrust in this main event situation, and he'd flub up once in a while. Everybody, you know, like the guys are sitting in the audience like you because they want to get their promos done. Jesus Christ, Demolition doesn't make any mistakes. What the hell's wrong with you? Then he'd make a second mistake, a third mistake. I felt sorry for him because there's a lot of pressure on him. But we did boom, boom, boom. If we had 50 interviews, we were done 50 times. Some guys would do, you know, the light would go on, and they'd see that light and they'd panic and they'd forget where they're at and who they're working with, you know. So they'd do the same interview 4 or 5 times. That's a long day when you're there.
Mm. So you're saying the end of the day is when it gets a little more gravelly.
Is it?
Well, I do a lot of talking, but yeah, I like to stay quiet every now and then. So now,
hold on. Which one of you gentlemen came up with the concept Fuji Stooge? Because that's one of the things that always remains in
I
my...
think Barry did.
No, I thought you did.
We did.
We did.
During most of the interviews, that's one of the things I
Stooge.
remember the most.
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
Fuji Stooge.
Yeah.
I think we were having a couple beers one night and he said, hey, what a stooge he is.
We had a
He's
couple-
leaving us. What a stooge.
We used to have a couple beers.
Yeah.
So, being the great tag wrestlers that you are, and reading some of the history of people who you've wrestled with, people you've wrestled against, people you've grown up with. Now, is there that one talent which is like pretty much your white whale, the one that has gotten away that you would have loved to have worked with, or have you worked with everyone?
Well, I don't.
I always wanted to work with Arn Anderson in a single. I'm very good friends with Arn, and he's a great worker, and I think his style and the way I would have worked, I think would have worked out really nice. I worked with Flair a couple of times, and went really well, but I think Arn's ego and my ego would have been about the same. I think we would have had some really good matches.
I don't think there's anybody that I would say off the top of my head that I would, missed working out with, or over the years I was fortunate. I mean, I went from Andre to Mulligan to Tommy Rich to Wrestling 2 to all the tag guys you mentioned, and everybody in between. Dino Bravo is a single. Over in Japan, all the top guys. We traveled all over the world and got to work against the top talent in the world. And we both always say we have traveled so much and gone to places that people pay a lot to go to, and we got paid to go there. So it's a rather unique lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think another one would be Dusty Rhodes. I wish I could have worked a long angle with him. I worked a couple matches with him, and that was it. But he was the top guy, and that'd be the guy to make the money with. And he was, I don't know if you've ever worked with him, but he was so easy to work with. You could do anything with him. That would have been a good one.
Now, speaking along the same lines of his question, as a tag team today, if you were to wrestle them, who would be the tag team you would like to wrestle and think you'd have an awesome match with, like the ones that are out there today?
I think was it the Young Guns?
Yeah,
Young Bucks?
Or the Young Bucks?
Young Bucks?
The Young Bucks. I think we'd have a great match with those guys, because with us being bigger and the power guys, and those guys can fly and do everything, and they're the baby faces that everybody loves, and they could sell like crazy. I think we would have unbelievable matches with those guys.
Yeah, it's. I don't really follow it that much anymore because I get up so early I'm a teacher, and I have to get up at 5 o'clock to be at class on time. And yeah, that's probably
because they're rotating.
We met those guys, a couple signings and stuff, and they seem to be students of the game. They know the history. I'm sure there's other teams out there, and I don't really follow anything with WWF, but I'm sure there's fantastic teams out there with good talent.
Awesome. Is there anything else anyone would? Okay.
All right. Before you guys went to work for Vince in the territory days, what were your favorite territories or promoters to work for? What would you have your best memories?
Well, I worked in Georgia, which I got spoiled because I bought a home in Georgia, and the travel was almost non-existent. They were same towns every week. I would be home at 11 o'clock watching 11 o'clock news at night. The money was great. The talent was great. You had everybody that was anybody in there. And then I also worked in Charlotte. Charlotte was fantastic. Charlotte was the New York before New York, but it was long. there's a lot of long trips, so my favorites would be those two and then Japan. Because Japan, you knew you were going to be there for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8, whatever your contract was. You knew when you landed, you knew when you were going to take off, you knew what you were going to bring home.
Yeah, I was in all those different territories too, and like Bill was saying, Charlotte was tough because, and I lived in Charlotte, you lived in Atlanta at the time when you were in the Charlotte territory. But if you were around Charlotte and the shows around there, it was great. But some days you would go 300 miles, you'd wrestle, and then you'd have to go 600 miles back the other way and be there the next day. So it was long, long territories. But I think my favorite was Florida Championship Wrestling, because it was, like Bill was saying, you're home every night. The longest trip was from Tampa to Miami, 250 miles or whatever, and you could get home. But that was kind of fun, because then maybe we'll stay overnight that night, go to the beach or whatever. So I think the Florida territory was the best for me.
You got spoiled there. There was at one point there was 22 different companies, 22 different places to work, and what is there, 3 or 4 now maybe? The new one, AEW, was it AEW? And Ring of Honor, and TNA, and then Vince. But for a long time, there was just Vince. But years ago, there was 22 here in the country. Plus, you had 4 or 5 in Japan, and you had 2 or 3 in Germany, and 2 or 3 in England, and 4 in Canada. So you could give a 2-week notice, and you could be working 2 weeks from now someplace else.
Yeah, and then when you're ready to leave, you'd rent a U-Haul, and you'd go to the building, and you'd have a loser leaves town. You'd get beat and get in the U-Haul and drive to the next territory. So it worked out pretty nice. You're working all the time.
Yeah.
Have you guys lost any loser leave town matches?
Yeah, I did. I was in New Orleans. I lost, and I went to Tampa. How about you? Did you ever do that?
No.
I didn't have a U-Haul, though. I just packed the car.
No, I don't think so. I think I lost them. Well, it's before the internet, years ago. And you were working angle with whoever it is, Flair, whoever, Tommy Rich, and you lose that night, and the next day you're on a plane to Japan. So people don't know, and now they know. They know you're leaving at 11 o'clock. So.
In the Japan days, I always remember reading like you either went to work for Inoki or you were working for Bottle. Which one?
I always worked for Inoki. Both groups were good. The thing about there was 4 companies when I started working. New Japan, who was Inoki. All Japan was Bubba. I forget the other 2, but they absorbed those other 2. And I was telling somebody upstairs I had a 14 or 15 year contract for anywhere from 12 to 15 weeks a year, all on a handshake with Inoki and myself. Nothing written. I mean, they were hard to negotiate with. They were hard to make a deal with. But once they said yes, we didn't have to worry about it. And so at the beginning of December, they would send me the itinerary for the next year. They did 20 weeks a year. They said, you pick. So I could pick 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 12. So I go over 12 to 14 weeks a year, but I pick, because a lot of times they'd have a 6-week tour, and they'd have Hogan for 2, and then me for 2, and Stan Hansen for 2, or something like that, or Brody. So they'd have a couple of names, and then they'd have fill in other guys and stuff. So, but first class hotels, first class airfare, first class transportation, first class money.
Yeah.
The money was the best part.
Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left. If anyone has any more final questions.
What advice would you give to any independent wrestlers trying to move up?
Well, it's really hard, but it's better now because, like Bill was saying, there's more wrestling around Impact and Ring of Honor and that, so it's a little better. But just get to the gym, eat right, train right, and wrestle every single day. No matter if you have to take a couple of guys and go to another territory in another state, and then get on the road and travel. The most important part is to get on the road and wrestle every single night and become somebody, become a character of something, and really master that.
And experience different styles. Every area has different styles. And we do a lot of seminars for young wrestling groups and stuff, and that question comes up an awful lot. And I always give them the advice, if you have a job, keep it. No, really. Because you can do this on the weekends, and you can drive a Mercedes. And if somebody asks you to do something, and they will, that you don't feel comfortable with, you say, I'd rather not. And then you still have your job to fall back on. Because there's 50 other places you can wrestle next weekend, the following weekend, Friday, Saturday, whatever. But if you're depending on this, and you depend on that Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, you're not going to drive that Mercedes for long. And you're not going to be able to say no. And the advice that I often say, my dad's 94 years old, and I pride myself in the fact that he told me, he says, one, get an education. Doesn't have to be college. Get an education or a trade, and be willing to say no. And I've done that. We've done that a lot.
Done that a lot.
And normally, and it happened with Vince, it happened with every promoter. I would rather not. We'll give you a notice. And as you start to walk out the door, and my trainer told me, he said, you're going to have to say no periodically, and you hope that by the time you get to the door, they say, hey, wait a minute, we'll work it out. But if they don't, you walk out the door. And it's happened. We've walked out the door and said, oh, shit. But most of the time when you get to the door, say, hey, come on back, we'll work it out. Because they know that you got something that they want. So, that'd be my advice. If you got a job, keep it. And I tell my grandson this, don't quit a job until you got another one. They're too hard to find. Oh, I'm going to do this, they're going to pay me this. They're not paying you now. There's 20 people who want that job. You got one. When they say start tomorrow, then you start tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Bill and Barry. Ladies and gentlemen, Access Bash.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you guys. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, number two.